Welcome to the Strap and Link podcast, where we cover brands from their inception to their latest release. It's the Montress Tudor. Like I said, better movement, spring drive potentially, Rolex Oyster Perpetual.
There's Super Ocean here. Now you see this kind of renaissance of Tudor. Finally, in 2016, they achieved the spring drive with an 8-day power. The podcast for watch lovers by watch lovers. New episodes every first and third Monday of the month.
David,
hello.
Can you guess what episode we're doing today, boys and girls?
Born.
I'll give you two guesses, but you
the
only
Born
need
movies.
one. Yeah. Doing our old Omega Part 2 episode today. I'm excited about this one. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit different than what we normally do.
Yeah.
A little bit different.
Very exciting. I've enjoyed the research portion of this more than really most of the portions before, so it's great. We're
Did you get to watch any movies?
No, but I have watched Casino Royale and the newest one, No Time to Die, actually in the last month, so that'll count, right?
Good. Yeah.
Casino Royale is the best, in my opinion, of the new ones, definitely, and of course that's my James Bond that I really grew up with, so I know everybody grew up with a different one and have their opinions, but no, Casino Royale is so good.
Yeah, Casino Royale is amazing. I got so unlucky with both the Batman and the 007s whenever I was growing up, because I had George Clooney's Batman, some of the worst movies ever made, and then I also had Pierce Brosnan's 007, which...
You didn't like Pierce's?
Oh, no. I did as a kid. I liked all of those movies, but now that I'm an adult, if you go back and watch those, you're
so
like,
cheesy.
You're like, oh my God, those were it was like the worst, the worst time for both of those franchises. I just happened to be like 10 years old, so new ones are awesome. I just didn't get to watch any Baby, and I'm not sleeping that well these days. I'm going to bed a little bit sooner, so I don't have time to watch a 2-hour movie.
Yeah,
but like you, I've watched Casino Royale, Skyfall twice, as well as Quantum of Solace. I've watched those three movies in the last 3 or 4 months. So I'm going to talk about a watch from one of those movies.
Yeah, I'm talking about Skyfall, as well as some older ones. So
well, let's go ahead and list out the watches that we're going to talk about in the movies. You want to?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So again, we'll have a couple honorable mentions as well, just different watches. A lot of these movies, especially newer ones, will actually have a couple different watches in it. So we'll normally just pick one, but the other one might have some significance or might be cool. Like Casino Royale, I know I have an honorable mention. They went back. Again, this is, of course, Daniel Craig's first James Bond movie. So they went back, and I know Brad is talking about one of the watches, but the other watch is just an OG looking S&P 300 blue dial, going back to the first ever Omega that was worn in a James Bond movie, kind of paying homage to that. So again, that's just an honorable mention. Not much to really talk about. I'm actually going to talk about the original with the Pierce Brosnan in a little while, but just there's a couple honorable mentions that we'll mention throughout the episode. But like I said, the first watch I'm going to talk about is going to be the Pierce Brosnan movie from GoldenEye, which was released in 1995. And then I believe Brett will be talking about a Planet Ocean from Casino Royale, correct? Yeah. So that is the watch we decided to talk about. And then I'll be talking about a Planet Ocean from a Skyfall in 2012. It's pretty much the same Planet Ocean as you see in Quantum of Solace. They look almost identical. The Skyfall version is just a little more refined. Then we'll wrap it up with, of course, the No Time to Die diver, one that took the world by storm since COVID. And it's a very beautiful watch. I mean, one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, that's my favorite on-screen watch, and probably same if I had to buy any of these. So we're spanning some Brosnan movies, and then again, mostly Daniel Craig movies. So I think that's fine for our audience, though. I mean, we tend to stick with newer watches. We usually don't. I mean, obviously we have a historical portion to our podcast, but we just don't go into like vintage watches. So I think that that's okay that we're not looking back. But to David's point, we're going to talk about a few watches that are not Omegas, I believe. So we'll get into that here in just a moment. But really quickly, again, just wanted to say welcome back into the show. If you don't already, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok at Strap and Link. So you can find us over there. We'll post some reels of our own watches and some other watches that we come in contact with, as well as episode sort of recaps and anecdotes from each of our shows. So give us a follow over there. And yeah, thanks for the folks that reached out to us after the last episode. Kind of toying around with some new formats, and
yeah,
I think this is kind of one of those formats. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, definitely. And like Brett was saying, we're going to kind of just walk you through a little bit of the history of the James Bond watches to understand how we ended up with the Omega, because it hasn't always been Omega watches that James Bond would wear in these movies. If you could think about another very popular diver, that'll probably give it away. But a Rolex Submariner was synonymous with James Bond in the past. So we'll talk about a little bit of that stuff and then hop right into it. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so the first ever watch that was worn by James Bond was actually a Gruen Precision, reference 510. It's a 34 millimeter gold case and white dial. It was worn in the Dr. No movie with Sean Connery as James Bond at the time. And this is actually the first time it was seen when Sean actually said the iconic James Bond was him wearing this watch. Yeah, he was wearing this watch during that time. So it was kind of a part of historic watch and just regular cinema history. Gruen was actually an American company based out of Ohio, believe it or not, which is kind of funny being an English, based on English characters. Yeah, but it was an American company based on Ohio, and until they actually quit creating watches, but up until the time it was pretty iconic to have an American watch in the cinema. And then after that, the Rolex Submariner really became synonymous with James Bond over the next couple decades. And again, Sean Connery's Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball all reference the Rolex Sub, reference number 6538, which is probably the most iconic Submariner within the James Bond world. And this is actually another really cool watch, because this is actually really taking a lot of reference from the Black Bay 58 that we see today, with the gilded indices and all, and then the silver bezel on the outside. So kind of a cool little history. Also, another watch just was thrown into that Thunderball movie was actually a Breitling Top Time. Fun fact.
I love the old vintage Top Times. Those are so cool. And yeah, that's like David just said, that sub, I mean, if you look at it from a glance, it just looks like a really beat up Tudor Black Bay 58, which Black Bay 58 is that's the 5722 reference, I think, from 1958 of the Tudor sub. But yeah, more realistically, honestly, it's the Rolex subs that are what they're now kind of looking back into the catalog. So it's really, really cool to see that on the wrist, because if you own a Black Bay 58, the original kind of, the black dial like me, very cool, because it's basically the same watch on Mr. Sean Connery's wrist. Sean Connery ultimately left, and once he did, in the next movie, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Pre-Daytona Chronograph from Rolex was shown. That was the reference 6238. And a much
very cool.
I mean again,
seeing a chronograph from Rolex without it being a Daytona is
pre-Daytona, meaning it looks nothing like a Daytona. There's no tachymeter scale. There's no bezel, or there's a smooth bezel rather on the outside. So just like the OP, smooth bezel that's offered today, it looks just very similar to that. A white dial, didn't have any of the quirky Daytona designs where the sub dials were a little bit off centered from the 9 and the 3 numerals. So very cool. Afterwards, from that point on, it was, again, mostly Rolex subs, including the 16610, which is, of course, a watch that one of your hosts, David, here owns, and the James Bond movie License to Kill. And that was the last Submariner before Omega stepped in to take the reins. And they did so with Pierce Brosnan's GoldenEye and video game off the charts. We all know about the hold music. Or the menu music. It's amazing. But that's our first watch of the day. So pass it back over to David, and we are going to go. We talked chronological order here. So the watches as well as the movies will get older to newer. So
again, in the mid 1990s, Pierce Brosnan kind of took over the role of James Bond and brought it back with a vengeance. And at the same time, they also debuted in 1995 GoldenEye and the Omega as a franchise watch partner. So again, this actually entered in with, again, like what I want to call the original. When I think of an S&P 300, I think of a blue, Seamaster Professional 300, and that you see probably all over the world. And this is, again, why it really became popular. The reference number is 2541.80. This was actually a quartz diver. And then true to form, of course, within the movie, it had a bunch of built-in detonators and touting a laser and all this craziness, but that was all built in for the movie. But again, this is really the iconic Seamaster, and I think it's part of the reason even today when you think of the Seamaster, especially an S&P 300, you think of this type of watch.
Mm-hmm. I love the new reissue of it too, because the reissue has it has like the updated numerals and the updated font on the bezel, as well as obviously a newer bracelet, even though everyone kind of agrees that it's not the best looking bracelet. But the cool bit is that the case back has the sort of circular little vortex, that happens at the end of each movie. Walks James Bond and then pulls the gun. So it has that sort of design on an open case back. Again, it's a master chronometer coaxial movement, so it's a pretty nice movement to look at. And then on the front, though, it has the same little wave pattern that they used during the Brosnan movie and Casino Royale. So it's got that older gen, for lack of a better phrase, texture dial, which I think is pretty cool. And then everything else is modernized. So it's a really cool watch, actually. But it is
very cool.
I think it's it's like 9K or 10K or something for that S&P. So it's substantially more expensive. Than
it's definitely
normal.
Yeah, definitely more expensive. Again, their next film, Tomorrow Never Dies, kind of pretty much was the same watch, but once you stepped off into their 1999 release, The World Is Not Enough, that's when they really went in heavy into that texture dials. You're talking 1999, late 90s, you're really getting those texture dials and a little bit sleeker look, and looks more like a 21st century watch. Especially, again, their final movie with Pierce Brosnan in 2002, Die Another Day, they really take that jump into the texture wavy dial that you think of today.
Yeah, and then later on is when they update the bezel on the watch to kind of what it's offered today, which the format of that dive bezel, to me, is one of the best looking. I love the way that the numerals on the Omega S&P bezel are kind of squished, which makes them a little bit wider. And it takes up a little bit more real estate on the dial. And then to kind of compensate for that, they use dots that are sort of right in the middle, as opposed to being closer towards the dial. So you have to kind of look at, two divers to really, get at what I'm talking about. But that new bezel, when they updated it, just looked that much better. Because if you look at the old pictures, and it has fonting kind of like a Seiko diver would, even like today. It's just a little bit smaller and it's really kind of skinny. When they widened it out, it just gave the watch, it kind of balanced it to me a little bit. So
yeah, definitely. Well, again, like I said, I mean, wrapping up the Pierce Brosnan movies, just within the movies alone, I agree with you. These were definitely the more, cheesy. It's funny. I really think all of James Bond's movies in the past, when you go back and watch them, it's really just more of a nostalgic kick of laughing. I mean, watching even some Sean Connery ones, I think Goldenfinger was the one where they flew over Fort Knox and you just see a plane just start dumping gas and all of a sudden everybody just starts falling out and dying like 3 seconds later. And I'm like, oh my. And, talking dad or whatever, he's like, man, that was the coolest thing when I was 10. Same thing with these Pierce Brosnan movies.
You know what? It's funny because it's similar to like the Fast and the Furious movies now. Yeah. Like, I mean, there hasn't been a 007 released in, 3 or 4 years now. So, like to me, I was kind of thinking the same thing too. It's like on the surface, 007, he's a cool, distinguished gentleman. He wears nice suits and he wears these fancy watches and he's real slick with his pistol and everything else. But then, the actual movies themselves, you're like, all right, this is just fancied up Fast and the Furious, or like fancied up like Expendables. It's not Rambo running around; it's a dude in a suit, but it's the same movie. So it's always funny and fun to remember that. 007's like one of the oldest
Mhm.
iterations of just a
Well,
straight up cheesy action movie.
if you remember too, I mean, just jumping over to, I know your next watch, Casino Royale,
Mhm.
when Daniel Craig first took over this role, there was a bit of controversy. 007's always this black haired, just gentleman. And when they saw Daniel Craig, he had like dirty blonde hair, kind of like your hair. And everybody was like, well, that's not the real 007. He's just a tiny dude. And, so he stepped off into this role and really had a point to prove. And again, he had to hit it out of the park on their first movie, or I think that whole series would have not lasted 7 movies or however long the Daniel Craigs
Right.
did last. So I mean, they really had to do a full tonal shift, even with the way Bond looked, and then really going away from that more cheesy into a really more serious and great set of movies here.
Yeah, for sure. There's still plenty of that kind of cheesy action, but in terms of like the quality of it and and the writing and the storytelling, it's so much better.
Head over heels over what's the difference since 2002 when Die Another Day came out, and then Casino Royale. So I mean, you're talking 4 years, 2006.
And so that does take us to the next movie, Casino Royale, as David just kind of introduced that. Came out in 2006, and the watch that I'm going to be talking about is the Seamaster Professional Planet Ocean. So this is a chronometer reference. The reference number is 2900.50.91. So again, in Casino Royale, one of the I would say less mass appealing watches of the list that we've kind of picked out for everyone today. But the reason that I included it is because it was if not the original Seamaster Planet Ocean, it was one of the first releases of the Planet Ocean line from Omega. This one was 45.5 case diameter. It's stainless steel. So like David said, he's going to talk about another Planet Ocean from a newer movie it's much more modern kind of terms. But I think this one is cool because, again, to me, it's like really speaks the James Bond kind of language, that it's this big kind of heavy chunky watch. It's 600 meters of water resistance. It's got coaxial movement, the 2500 caliber, which was in some of the Pierce Brosnan movies as well, or watches rather. So 48 hours of power reserve. But again, I think just very, very cool, a little bit nostalgic, being, again, one of the first Planet Oceans released. I think a more applicable spy watch than the next two that we're going to talk about. But that styling, just being like classic Seamaster, that sets the stage for all of the future 007 Planet Oceans, right? So
yeah,
this is the one that's a little bit more kind of rough around the edges. It comes with this rubber strap that, you kind of look at it and you're like, all right, this watch looks like it could have been released in 1995 with that rubber strap, right? And it doesn't look, to David's point, it's not really that refined as that package. But then you look at the dial and at the bezel and then at the case shape, and all of that is really authentic Omega. And then when you get into the next Planet Ocean, that Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, I think both had, that one is the more kind of like consumer friendly version.
Yeah.
Whereas I think this one is like the spy friendly version. So that's why I wanted to include this one, a little bit lesser known reference. But again, I think it's that spy-esque sort of aesthetic to it.
Yeah, definitely. Again, Quantum of Solace, like you said, comes afterwards, and that the movie itself was definitely more considered of a disappointment. I know it didn't hit home like they wanted it to, especially after the success of Casino Royale. But what they did really hit home, again, I'll talk about Quantum of Solace and Skyfall really probably interchangeable here, because the watch, again, I think you need to talk about all three of them because they're just iterations of the one prior. The Quantum of Solace one definitely hit more mainstream. A very skinny bezel. It actually had the name of the movie was actually in the middle of the watch dial. Quantum of Solace. They on the Quantum of Solace and the Skyfall watches, they actually went way more movie friendly. Even put in some sort of James Bond, tag into the watch dial. The watch I really wanted to talk about was the Skyfall version, and Yeah, it has the red fonting. The movie came out in 2012. I think the original release date again of this was around '05, but they just kept reiterating it with a 42 millimeter diameter stainless steel, water resistance, of course, 600 meters. It had the caliber 8500, which was an upgraded version of the coaxial caliber 2500, which was seen in the prior iterations of it. A lower power reserve of around 48 hours, which I think all of these are really hitting around that 2-day mark. So there's really no up or down on that. But a really cool feature of this watch that I love is the 7-hour marker for 007 has the actual monogram of 007 on it. So
that's
I thought that was
that's
very
and it's
cool.
in between like two of the indices, I think, right? Okay, yeah, that's what I was
Brett,
thinking.
If you look on our notes, I actually have one.
Pulled
up. Yeah, so
okay.
it's very cool.
Yeah, it's got the gun logo. That's so cool, man.
Yeah, so that's on the 7. Again, the dial almost has a Patek-ish look. You know how it has like a very rectangle, it's lined out dial.
Yeah.
So it's not like a smooth dial. Again, very just classy. I love the bezel on this one because it has almost a gunmetal gray look to it. So it has a black dial and almost a lighter gray bezel. So there's a little bit of two-tone in it that you maybe wouldn't notice on other watches. This watch to me really, I mean, he ended up wearing an Aquaterra in this movie as well for the more sophisticated scenes. But this movie to me looks like an S&P 300 and Aquaterra had a baby. It's a perfect mix of the two.
You're talking about the Skyfall model.
Yeah, the Skyfall model. Yeah, it's a perfect mix of the two. And I think it's great because he actually did start wearing some Aquaterras in this movie as well.
I know. I didn't know that until doing research, but yeah, that is a good point. It's not the pattern is not quite like the tapisserie pattern that the Royal Oak has. It's like you said, it almost looks like it's like graphing paper.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it does.
That's what it reminds me, because even the Patek, they do this thing where it is little squares, but they expand the shape of the squares, or they kind of warp them to present it like a sunburst pattern almost. Yeah. So I think the squares are even like chunkier, like in the center, and then they get smaller to make it appear like kind of a domed appearance. Whereas the Omega, it's just similar to the Aquaterra. The pattern is just pressed right onto the dial, and it's just there across. It doesn't do any, shaping or any sort of affecting like that. So it does have this a little bit more of this industrious kind of feel to it, right? Yeah.
I really like that watch. I mean, that's definitely my favorite of the Planet Oceans, in my opinion. You know, it's like they get a little bit better every time. Like you said, yours was more utility look, and then of course they started going. People want to buy these watches, so they really started fitting in. Having it more of a collector's piece. And this reference number for the Planet Ocean that I'm talking about with the 007 at the 7-hour marker is reference 232.30.42.21.01.001. A little bit, you can rewind that if you need to look it up exactly.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the fourth and the final watch that we're going to kind of deep dive in today. That's going to be the Seamaster Diver 300 007 edition. That was a part of the movie No Time to Die in 2021. A little confusing. This watch, everything I read said that it released in 2019, but No Time to Die came out, I thought, in 2021.
It's because No Time to Die was delayed.
I was going to okay. Well, yeah, okay. I assumed as much. It was delayed due to COVID or something like that, but it was, it's still, I guess now, looking back, it's kind of funny. You're like, oh, wow, that watch, this 007 watch was kind of a spoiler for the movie, at least for the watch nerds. But yeah, so released in 2019 then. It is 42 millimeter diameter, comes with a grade 2 titanium case, so super, super light. They also offered it on a NATO strap in addition to that sort of mesh Milan's, kind of style. So I would imagine that on that NATO, it feels like absolutely nothing is,
at all
on your wrist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be cool with that mesh metal band, but I would, the weight, I bet, with a NATO strap is just crazy. This one does have a master chronometer, the Omega coaxial caliber 8806. I love how many in-house calibers that Omega have. Absolutely love it. 25,200 BPH, or vibrations per hour there, 55-hour power reserve. So stepped up a little bit from the last coaxial that we're talking about in some of the Planet Oceans. Even that updated 8500 caliber over the original 2500 caliber still was, not packing that much in terms of spec. So at least a little bit of increase here. And remember those Daniel Craig videos that we were taking a look at? I know we watched them on YouTube where he kind of brought, a sample of his own collection. I don't imagine that's the full one, but like 5 or 6 watches, and probably 2 or 3 were from James Bond movies. And he did have this watch, was one of them. And what was really cool is that the broad arrow at the 6 o'clock, supposedly, I didn't know this until watching this video, but supposedly that broad arrow is a what is the military in the UK called?
Well, there's MI5 and MI6.
Well, yeah, it's like whatever, the Defense Department for the UK is. That broad arrow was put onto things, I guess, that typically in the past were given to military members, but it was required to be given back to the state at the end of your service. So you might have been like a pilot in the Royal Air Force or something like that, or worked in the Navy, and maybe you got a Tudor or a Rolex or an Omega or something, but that broad arrow meant at the end of your service you had to give it back.
Bring it on back.
Yeah. So even like one more little bit, and it kind of reminds me of the other watch from Casino Royale where, I was saying like that's not really one that people would look at today and start gawking over. But I thought that was cool because I was kind of saying that how that watch just feels like that's for the spies, and so it's cool that Omega did a little something like that, give it a little note.
Yeah, I also liked how in the interview he was like, yeah, man, until, a couple months ago, this watch that I wore during the opening scene of Casino Royale still had red clay on it from that shooting.
Yeah.
I never even cleaned it. I just kept it, authentic to the time, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that is the watch as well. I believe that he said that he would keep over any of the other ones if he had a choice, right?
Yeah. So so the guy from Esquire magazine, I believe, had asked him, which one. He's got some different speedies in there too. So he does have some non 007 Omegas in there that are really cool. He's got 2 special edition Speedmaster moon watches, so those are pretty cool. But yeah, he said that original, it was that first Planet Ocean from Casino Royale, the 45.5 millimeter. Big chunky watch with this big kind of industrious, kind of black rubber band on it. So it was pretty cool to see that he's kept those and that he's also just like worn the hell out of them. Because
I've always wondered that too. I guess maybe I just didn't know because the lack of research I did. But I'm like, man, I hope Daniel Craig appreciates the watches that he wears in these movies, and doesn't just say I'm not a watch guy and then gives them back after the end of the movie. I'm like, okay, I hope he holds on to some of these because these are freaking cool, to be known for these watches. And so I'm glad that he's a watch guy enough to say, hey, this is something I want to keep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's awesome. And again, that he's like actually wearing them. I know like Stallone does that too. Stallone has a lot of he's got, some well, not some, but he's got many similar videos like that where he's showing off a collection of watches that maybe he got for like, during like all of the Expendable movies or whatever, There was another one where he was I believe he was auctioning off 5 different Richard Milles. 5 different Richard Milles. So you're talking millions of dollars worth of these pieces, and 2 of them, I believe, he said that Richard Mille called Sylvester and they were like, "We're doing this special edition, or we're gonna make this one of a kind," and like he got these one of a kind, unique pieces that he was then auctioning off. So it's super cool to see people that actually appreciate it. Yeah, and then kind of sad to see that Daniel Craig he just looks old.
Yeah, he did look older in that movie. I guess he was promoting his new Glass Onion, the mystery movie series. I guess there are 2 of them now. Yeah, and when they would do a flashback to the old ones, I mean, it's 20 years ago. It's crazy. It just doesn't seem like that long ago since they started releasing these in 05, 06. Yeah, so you're right at the 20-year cusp, and But hey, I bet he could still suit it up one time. And I mean, but also what we were talking about is like, God, he looks so different from even when the last movie came out a few years ago. But you also have to think those movies were even pre-recorded, because of COVID again. They didn't release it right when it finished, and so
yeah. I mean, the reality
I'm
of that
sure
statement,
that Hollywood makeup could make him look better though if he needed to.
yeah. The cost on this one, a cool $10,000 for this watch, and then I knew earlier we talked about the currently available, the kind of the normal, blue dial, not this, kind of faux patina look, but the traditional one that has the OG Pierce Brosnan waves on the dial. That one also being, again, I think $9,000 for that one. So
yeah,
I don't know. What do you think about the cost of that? I mean, is it worth? Like, I guess considering what you're getting as a 007 / an Omega fan, would you be willing to pay? I think in the case of the S&P 300, retail is what, 5,500 or 6K, something like that, and then these are jumping to 9 or 10. So you're
paying for the movie
40 to 50, or I'm sorry, actually 80 to like 100% price increase for it being a collectible. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pricey, but I feel like Omega has a bunch of pricey S&P 300s when it gets into the, more specialized version. So it's really nothing out of the norm. Their blacked out S&P 300s pretty high up there, I think around $9,000 as well. And I mean, I think I'd rather have the James Bond. I mean, if you're just a huge James Bond fan, this is a no-brainer to get. And I think they probably understand that and realize, whatever we price this at, as long as we're not crazy, we'll get purchases from those type of people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, S&P 300s just aren't my style. Of just my wrist, I think, is too small. But I understand if I like big chunky dive watches. I mean, this would be a Grail. I mean, it looks great.
It does.
Yeah.
I wish
they had one of these looks in like an Aquaterra version, and then I'd be okay. Well, that's what I want.
Okay, something a little slimmer, but still kind of vintage.
But I mean,
look.
with the people that want the 007, watch, love the movie. I mean, this is it. And, let's play the game of, okay, would you rather have this watch or a 2012 black Submariner? I mean, that's kind of they're both around the same price, aftermarket and around the 2010 marks, for a black Submariner, and this is their dive watch versus a black Sub. Both will keep their value. So I mean, you really don't have that problem. Obviously, a limited edition Omega will, and then a Sub always does. So I mean, you said you'd rather have the Seamaster?
I think I would rather have the Omega. Yeah. I mean, there's no knock to me for the Sub. I just feel like I've nearly been there and done that since I have a Black Bay. I mean, but I will say this: what's going for the Sub for me? I got that big Grand Seiko diver now, so it's a little bit bigger. The proportions, no longer really a concern for me because I very quickly got used to a 44 millimeter Grand Seiko spring drive.
Yeah, it's much bigger.
So it's not the proportions, but again, I just think the look, the aesthetic of this watch is really unique. However, one of the concerns, because I did consider, we were just talking about my next watch. Hopefully, one of my grails is going to be an Omega Speedy, and we were just talking about that. And recently I considered this watch in this kind of list of, what is this next, special watch going to be? And the problem I steered away from it is if you have a Black Bay 58, it's like having the same watch from two different brands because it's the S&P 300 foundation, just like the Black Bay is the Tudor / the Rolex Sub foundation. And they're both, faux patina, styled. So that's the only knock about this watch is that I feel like if you have a Black Bay, it's way too similar for me. Now you have like a blue dial Black Bay, but you don't like this watch. So or it's not that you don't like this watch, it's that you don't prefer the dimensions. It sounds like, yeah.
I mean, obviously if it was gifted, I'd love to wear it. I wouldn't pay if it was 5,500.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with it. It's very similar to a Black Bay. I understand where you're coming from with the Rolex to Black Bay. I mean, other than just as a diver watch. And I mean, I hit that problem, which is why I ended up buying the Grand Seiko I did. If you remember, I was really torn between buying the Grand Seiko Skyflake or buying the Breitling Super Ocean Heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And but the real reason I ended up going against the Super Ocean Heritage was because I didn't want another diver watch. So I understand that if you're at your point too, where you're like, I have 2-3 diver watches, I don't need a fourth one. Then yeah, I definitely wouldn't get this one. I would go more your direction, like a Speedy or something like that, a chronometer or a dress watch like I did. But if you just only have one watch and you like divers, and if I was back a couple years and I only had my Black Bay 58, I wouldn't be turned off for buying a Seamaster 300.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is enough difference there as long as you're okay with not having multiple divers.
Yeah, and I think we're probably saying the same thing because my only disagreement with this watch, I was just saying from like a styling perspective.
Yeah.
Like obviously the bracelet is unique, but like right now in my personal collection, I mean, you and I have been talking about it a lot because I've been trying to sell a few pieces, but my whole thing right now is just that I learned when I went on that kind of tear of buying a bunch of watches, I was buying them so quickly that I really didn't get the chance to like appreciate and really learn like what I liked and what I didn't like about them. And I kind of made the mistake of buying a few too many that were just too similar to one another. And so that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
With this dial, just being that the Black Bay 58, if it's in the
well,
black
yeah,
dial
with yours
configuration, like mine,
look. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like I wouldn't mind having a third diver, because my Grand Seiko is a black dial white numeral. So I would love a blue dial sub or a blue dial S&P 300, but I just don't know. It's like I would get these two, and it'd be like
you'd have to pick.
Well, and that's like always picking it for the bracelet. It's like, ooh, do I want like a more oyster style today, or a little bit more of a sophisticated look today? Because otherwise, to me, I'm going to look at it and it's like that is the same watch, for the same use case. Yeah.
Well, I mean, me personally, and you might be asking, well, why, David, did you have to decide between the Grand Seiko or the Blue Super Ocean Heritage? And it was because of, color coordinating. Series. And same thing with you. I mean, what you're saying there is you're like, hey, I have two that are so similar in colors. Like, I like having a black sporty watch, a black dressy watch, a blue sporty watch, a blue dressy watch, because you always know, hey, okay, I'm going with this color, I'm dressed down, I'm going with the blue. You don't have to make that decision. And if you had the No Time to Die Omega, I feel, and the Black Bay Gilded like you have, I feel like it would be a lot of just decision making, and you're like, well, God, I guess I'll go with this one. I guess I'll go with that one. You have no predetermined watch to go with an outfit, which makes your life a lot easier once you have 4 or 5 watches like we do where they're all kind of across the board, but you have something for every occasion.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's one of those things where as a collector, unfortunately, you have to kind of make those mistakes before you really know what it is that you like and that you don't like. That the mistake that I made twice was buying colored dials. I bought some really fun, some really unique colored dials. If you've been a listener of our show for a long time, you've heard me many times bitch about how many watch companies are making pastel dials that just copied the Patek Tiffany collab and then followed by the Rolex baby blue OP.
Yeah.
And that was my mistake. I kind of fell into that trap. I was like, ooh, these are everywhere. Every watch company in the world is making them right now. And I can snag one up. And I did. And I bought a pink dial and I loved it, but I was limited in when I could wear it. So then I bought a green dial. And again, it wasn't so much the dial in that case. It was a smidge, but enough, to bring it up here, obviously. But the point being is, like when you're building out a collection, like David said, he wants those kind of different watches for different scenarios. And then my mistake was buying a bunch of watches that function the same. I had a bunch of 3-handers. And so now it's like, all right, if you got 2 black divers, I don't want another black diver at all. Maybe get a white dial S&P 300 or a very colorful Breitling Super Ocean would be amazing.
Yeah.
And so that was my mistake. I had, just far too many 3-handers. And so that's why I keep saying, next into consideration was really a chronograph. And I've been looking at chronographs for like months now, from, $2,000 Hamiltons up to, $10,000, different Omegas and Zeniths and things like that. So I think that's kind of the direction that I'm looking next because it provides so much difference, right? It'll be the only chronograph that I have. Still sporty. So there's
and I think
things to consider.
This is a perfect, just difference between two watch collectors where, Brett, that's what Brett's always focused on. And I feel like he's always told us, he cares a lot about functionality too. I have nothing but three-handers and I don't care about getting enough. I mean, obviously, I would love a Daytona or something, but I don't have a GMT. If I didn't ever buy a GMT, I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep over it, but I care more just about the visual looks of the watches, different colors and things like that. So that's where I connect when he was saying, No Time to Die and the Black Bay I have are too similar. But then, he's also, I feel like when you did what Brett did, buying so many different types of watches very quickly, the pink one, the green one, that's great. But to me, I want to have my staple pieces first and then have that fun. And I feel like Brett had a few staple pieces, but again, I've said this 20 times for our long-time listeners. I always want a black dressy, a black dress down, a blue dress down, a blue dressy, and then a white dial. Those are like my 5 staples. Once I have those, then you can start really stepping off and doing some crazy ping, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you have those 5, or even take away the white one and say those 4, you can have a watch for any scenario. And then you're never just like, dang, man, I wish, I'm wearing a black suit tonight. I'm wearing a blue suit tonight. I'm wearing a gray suit. You have something black and blue will go with any of that. And then same thing about dressing down, going to the store, going out to a brewery during the day, you still have the dress down. The worst thing is to have like a great Skyflake and it just can't be dressed down enough. You want to wear it, you want to go to a brewery, but it just looks weird, and that's when it's nice to have those 4 staple pieces and then go off and do your green, pink, whatever colors you want to do, baby blue, teal. But I feel like, and that's what I think probably happened with you, Brett. You didn't have all the staple pieces you wanted. You'd rather have
100%.
had a couple more staple, the black Speedy, have a really dressed down black, or even, that type of watch versus a pink one.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, in hindsight, where I went wrong was buying the Grand Seiko Bamboo, because the price of that watch is right around the price of a Speedy on the aftermarket. And that, it pretty much hits the nail on the head, because, as I've started to consolidate these pieces, the question to me wasn't necessarily like, how do I get, again, it's different, like, school of thought for watch collecting than David. So mine wasn't so much of like, how do I get, watches that are applicable to these different scenarios, so much as it was, I looked at some watches and I was like, I just had these realizations like, I will never get rid of this watch ever.
Yeah.
This watch will be in my family until we're no longer here. Yeah, exactly. And then there's other watches.
Because he doesn't give a crap about watches, and he's like, I'll just get all this free money.
Probably, yeah. But then there's like other watches that, like, at the time that you buy that you buy them, or even when you're in that kind of hunt and that chase, you're like, oh man, I can't wait to get this watch. And then a year into owning it, again, I just kind of like had that realization with multiple pieces where I was just like, there's nothing emotionally attaching me to this watch. So I think, like, to really pull the psychology of it back, it's not even so much to me that I even made mistakes with some of these dials. I mean, obviously, do I want a more applicable watch that I can make some more emotional connection to because I can wear it? Yeah, of course. If you got a pink dial watch, you're only going to wear that thing a few times throughout the summer, maybe. And so, that's different to me than like my GMT, for example. That travels everywhere with me.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool. Again, to me, that's what's cool about it. And that's
what's amazing about that watch is also what I was saying about the Grand Seiko Skyflake. Your Grand Seiko GMT will dress up and dress down. That's why it's a perfect watch. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a strap monster. And again, it goes everywhere with me. Like, it's been like literally all over the fucking world with me, So it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, that watch cost me $4,500. Like, it's not even, it's nothing special in the grand scheme of anything, but it's really so important to me. Mm-hmm. So now, it is certainly a little bit of that, like, yeah, you got to get your core pieces, the ones that, like, I want 4 or 5 of those watches, right? That I can just have from the time that I'm 25 to the time that I'm 50 and 60 and 70 before I start, giving them away to my son, or, if that day ever even comes. So, Speedy is like one of those. And then, I probably went backwards around it, right? Because then, to your point, exactly, that's when you can start having fun, And you're like, well, if experiment with this watch. It's not going to make or break anything. Because again, me looking back in hindsight, if I had bought that Speedy with the money that I bought that Bamboo with, I'd be sitting pretty right now, and not waiting for this next special
You'd be wanting a Bamboo
life
right now or something.
yeah, I mean, potentially. And that's always true too. There, we are talking about butterfly effects here, basically, right? So yeah, hindsight's 20/20 and all that kind of thing. But I think my thing for listeners is like, don't be afraid to make those mistakes, because again, I've told David that it's like, that's the only way that what's really important to you is by screwing up, and you buy a $10,000 watch that 2 years later, you sell it for $6,000 and you're like, shit, I could have done this with that money instead. But it takes mistakes for people to learn. And, if your goal is long-term, like lifelong watch collecting, that's just going to happen,
Yeah. You're going to take a couple losses.
To shift the gears a little bit here, and also to just kind of wrap us up, I know we're about 50 minutes into today's episode. So what is your next piece? Do you have like thoughts around that? Because I've talked to you a lot about what I've been trying to sell. I've started to sell a few of these pieces, and just told you in the podcast and everyone obviously that the Speedy will be next. But what are you looking for next? You said a white dial, which you don't have. So is that the true next piece?
I don't know. In all honesty, a white dial Omega Globemaster is definitely up there. Thought about. I like the Aquaterras. A lot of people I know have Aquaterras, so I don't really want to have the same thing or around the same thing they have. But I'm thinking maybe a white dial Omega, or going back and getting some sort of Breitling Super Ocean Heritage. But there's really the two Breitling Super Ocean Heritages are the blue and the black, and I don't want another black. I don't believe.
Can't do black.
No,
you can't.
But I don't think I want another blue. I've already got two blue watches. If I'm doing a black, I'm going to do a black Rolex Datejust 41, the two-tone, get a real dressy black watch, which I still don't own. I really have, when it comes to dress watches, I have the Grand Seiko Skyflake, and that's really it. I have the Yachtmaster that definitely dresses up and looks great in the suit, which is taking place of a lot of my wants. But other than that, you have the Tudor, the Sub, and all of those things that are really dressed down. But a Globemaster as well is a dressy watch, and something different.
Yeah,
I like the Speedy. I, of course, always thought I wanted a Speedy. It's just, I don't know. The same thing with the Daytonas. They used to be very Speedy and Daytona heavy, and now I'm kind of fading away from that. And you never know, it could come back. But yeah,
and I saw someone do a Datejust 41 config, black dial, smooth bezel, oyster bracelet. And I think we talked about that like a month ago or something, but I was like, I would have never thought to done the smooth and the oyster on a Datejust. But what it did is it kind of gave it like a little bit of like an elevated Air King and, kind of OP look. Like it didn't really look like a Datejust, because I think a lot of those nowadays, you see them with Jubilees and fluted bezels. But in just that flat config, it looked really like this, this very functional daily wear, daily beater.
Yeah,
because a lot of times you see the Explorer, the Rolex Explorer 1 in that config. If people go like black, where you see like an Air King, but this one's just like refined. It's the same idea but refined. And again, I never see them in that config. So
yeah. They're I think a black dress or a white, something that would go well with a black suit is probably going to be the direction I go next.
You got a lot of options there. A lot of options. Yeah, I would. I mean, you do have two divers. I would say to try to steer clear of that. But I don't know.
I mean, there's the black two-tone Datejust I want, a Globemaster I want, and then after that I would go the blanking on it. The Breitling Super Ocean Heritage, I would go back for that one, as long as they still have the blue and gold, because that's just a cool watch. Then after I get a couple more dressies, then I would think about going back to a diver.
Dude, the white dial Glowmaster is sick. You should get one of those, dude, with the pan pie dial and the little kind of like fluted bezel. That thing is sick, man.
Yeah, it's a definitely.
And you can find pictures too with a black strap, dude. I think that's got to be up there.
Yeah, I just love the indented dial. Is just very
Yeah.
different. You know,
Yeah.
that just stands out and it's different. So just let us know how you like it, and if you want to hear more about these type of movies, watches within movies, and
Yeah,
we'll
for
be
sure.
back
Yeah.
in a couple weeks.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we've got Christopher Ward episode coming up, as well as maybe kind of another one of these more kind of informal episodes. But everyone have a great rest of the week, all that good stuff, and we'll catch up with you guys here in a couple weeks. Bye.